All right, so moving on, we are going to talk about walk cycles. It's important to recognize why walk cycles are one of the first exercises that we do when we're trying to learn mechanics. When you think about a person walking or a creature walking, think about the amount of action that's happening throughout the body, right? It's not just the feet, it's the legs, it's the hips, it's the body, it's the arms, the shoulders, the hands, the head, the neck. Everything moves, right? And so understanding how to create that movement in a walk cycle is going to be a really important step towards understanding more complex mechanics. The reason being is that pretty much most characters walk or have some kind of walk cycle, right? If you think about any kind of movie, main characters, they're going to be walking somewhere, they're going to be running somewhere. So understanding how to create that locomotion in any given character is going to be a really early priority to understanding how to animate that character, right? And characters can walk in different ways or run in different unique ways, right? And so understanding that anatomy when you approach the character and understanding how to approach the mechanics is going to be a really important first step. So that is why we teach walk cycles pretty soon when we're learning animation after the basics, right? What we're going to do for this exercise specifically is we're going to use one of these drawings as our reference instead of an actual video reference like we did in the other exercises, right? And so what that means is what I'll usually do is I'll just type in walk cycle Richard Williams into the Google search, and that's going to come up with a bunch of these examples. If you're not sure who Richard Williams is, look him up. He's a very prominent educator and animator in our industry. And so we have here our examples. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this image, and I'm going to tell you guys how to bring this image into Maya so that we can use it within the actual viewport to create reference for our walk cycle. All right, so now we are back in Maya, and you can see here that I already have my character rig here. The reason we are using this kind of a rig is because we want to try and understand the mechanics of how legs work with hips, right? This has a lot of motion already. The range of motion that hips have alone in a walk cycle can get confusing. So trying to keep up with what is supposed to be moving and when with just this amount of character is already going to be difficult enough before we move into a full body character walk cycle. It's going to be really important that we understand just how to utilize a legs with hips character first. All right, so I have my character rig in here. I'm going to have him walk forward, but I need to be able to create the proper key poses for that, right? The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the reference image that I just saved, the Richard Williams one, right? So I'm going to go to Create up here. I'm going to go down to Cameras, and I'm going to select the camera option. There are multiple ways to create an image plane within Maya. This is the way that I'll do it, and this is the only way that I'm going to show you guys how to do it in this specific tutorial. Feel free to look up other ways if you'd like. So I have my camera here. I have it selected. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the attribute editor over here on the side, and I'm going to scroll down until I get to an area which is called environment. Drop that down, and I see here the option for image plane. I'm going to select the create button. We're just going to create our image plane right here, and then right here with the folder is where I'm going to go and I'm going to find that specific file that I just saved, right? And I saved it. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Here it is, right? So I saved my walk cycle PNG, and now I can press that open, and that is officially open in my Maya space here now. I can manipulate the location of this image plane by moving the camera, changing the size, scaling it up and down, right? I'm gonna go ahead and keep it pretty much the same size, more or less, and see if I can just move it back to give myself space. And now what I have here is I have an image specifically telling me what frames I want which poses on, right? So we can see here, for example, that on frame number 1, I'm going to already have the start of my walk cycle mid-cycle, right? We do not want to go from a standing pose the way you have right here on the character into the walk. We want to start as if the character has been walking already, right? That's the point of a cycle. It's an infinite movement forward. And so we have to be able to have it start as if it has been doing that already. So we can see here that my first pose has the foreground leg forward and the background leg backward. We can see that that's the background leg because it's colored in. on frame number 1, and we can see that the down pose is on frame number 4, and so on. We have all of our poses here mapped out for us based off of the keyframes that we see here on this image. So what I'm going to do now, my responsibility is going to be to create these key poses, right, on each one of these frames. And I'm going to make sure that I'm doing that with the proper movement on the legs and the body, including proper rotations upwards, leftwards, and right, making sure that everything makes sense. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create that first pose for you guys here. And then I'm going to see if I can just create those other poses so that we can make sure that we're moving forward at a good pace, right? So I can see here that, again, the foreground leg is forward, right? I'm going to use my foot roll option here as opposed to my rotation to create that roll look here. And I'm going to actually do the exact same thing on the back leg. I'm going to move that leg back, and I'm going to use that foot roll to create the kind of shape that I want, right? I'm going to need to manipulate the body a little bit to make sure that that makes sense as well, right? Just like that, right? Now, some things to consider is, again, our rotation of our body. I want to make sure that this part of the body is rotated a little bit in this direction, right? We can see that the reason being is that the screen left leg is forward, so our body should be rotated in that direction as well, right? And when that happens, I'm going to have to adjust that pose just a little bit. You can see here that that pose is a straight leg, right? So I'm trying to create that exact same kind of look there, right there. If you guys use this exact same rig, which is called the Ultimate Walker rig, let's make sure that we set this foot brake option to probably like 60 or 70 on both of our feet here. That's going to give the option for it to create this rolling effect on the foot itself, right? Like you can see that the toes stay down, right? That's exactly what we want. I can see that the feet are not exactly on the ground, right? So I have to address that. What I'll do probably is I'll move this foot a little bit inward, move this foot a little bit inward, right? Maybe even create a little bit of a rotation. And I don't want to do too many things. I don't want to create way too many different channels here. But I do want to make sure that my poses look really nice, right? So I am going to try a few things. Looks like I'm going to just need to lower my body here to make sure that back leg is planted on the ground, right? There we go. That's starting to look a little bit like our first pose. That's looking pretty good. I think that there might be too much rotation on our Rotate Z, right, channel. So I'm going to put that back to 0. I'm going to set my Rotate X to 0 as well. Honestly, I want to try and keep my poses as clean as possible when it comes to my channel box up here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and simplify a lot of these numbers. So for example, foot roll you can see is on negative 41.7. What I'm going to try and do here is see if I can simplify this. So I'm going to round this. So I'm going to say that that is going to be negative 42. You'll notice that that barely changes the pose at all, which is a good thing. We don't want to change it necessarily so much as we want these numbers just to be a little bit more manageable. So rotate Y, negative 6.557, I'm going to change that to negative 6.5. The reason that I'm doing this is because as I progress my walk cycle, it's going to be much easier for me to maintain uniform discipline on the actual poses if my numbers here are easier to manage. It's going to be way easier for me, for example, on Translate Z to set this to just a regular 2 than it is to 2.024. And that's something that I can adjust the entire time. You can see that that affects it slightly significantly, actually, right? It gets rid of our straight leg pose. So that's something I want to be aware of. I wonder if I can change that to maybe like a 2.03, which is still a little bit more manageable. But it's keeping that same shape, right? Translate X, I wonder if I can just set that to 0 because it's pretty close. Oh, that was our movement inward. Now we don't want to do that. Let's set that to 0.2. Much better, right? And now our numbers here look much more manageable. I'm going to do that for all the controls that I have here on my pose, and I'm going to keep on doing that, keeping that uniform and that control over my values here throughout my walk cycle. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to try and clean up my values here and see if I can move on and create a few more of these poses so we can see how we can progress. All right, so I went ahead and posed out everything that I can see here on my reference image. So if I press the play, you can see that this is where we're at. Once again, I'm going to be doing this in stepped so that I can figure out my poses and timing before I move into my spline phase and worry about all the in-between animation, right? Looking at this is just immediately what I have after I've posed out my poses. I can already see a few mistakes that I want to make sure that I tackle before I move into the spline phase. One mistake that I can see here is that the screen right foot here looks like it readjusts its position at a certain point, right? So I can see that it takes a step here, and then here it moves screen left. Do you see that? And if I have my weight on this foot, then that foot should not be moving or sliding around the ground. Feet sliding on the ground is one of the more common errors made when people are learning how to make a walk cycle. That and knee pops. The knee pops will become more obvious when we move into spline if they exist at all. But for now, what I want to do, prioritize before I move into spline, is finish fixing any of the poses that I need to fix. Or making sure that I don't bring any mistakes with me, such as the feet sliding around on the ground. So that's what I'm going to tackle next before I move into spline. So I'm going to stay in the blocking stage right now and just try and clean this up a little bit more. So now I'm at a point where I am pretty happy with my blocking pass. Right? It looks like the feet are doing what they need to do. Looks like the body is doing what it needs to do. Really, there's just a few things that I want to make sure that I'm focusing on in this stage. I can see that there's things that I want to adjust with the animation, but a lot of these things I can do in the next stage, the spline stage. Some of the things that I don't want to have to worry about in the spline stage are going to be my feet contacts and my overall poses, right? Where the legs are extended, which ways are the hips being rotated, right? You can see that the hips are rotating a little bit. And then when I go into the spline stage, these things I can continue to refine, right? So like, let's say that I want to refine the hip rotations a little bit more, make them go in one direction more. I can do that in the spline stage. Really, what I want to make sure I'm doing in this blocking stage is making sure that my building blocks, right, are there so that I can go into more detail on the next following stage. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. I'm going to go to my settings and set this back to my auto custom. I'm going to save my file, and then I'm going to set this to spline. And then we're going to watch it without actually having to make any changes yet. One more thing before we go on to that stage I want to make sure that I point out is one important thing is that I want to make sure that my first pose is identical to my last pose. Not in terms of their placement, but in terms of their poses should be the exact same. The reason for this being is that my entire walk cycle is just between frame 1 and frame 25, just like on this chart. And then it'll start over. And so I can use an infinity cycle in Maya, which I'm going to show you guys how to do, to create the rest of the walk cycle so that it walks forever, essentially, right? That just means that I need this initial cycle to be perfect. And in order for it to be perfect, I need my first pose and my last pose to be identical. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to our next stage, our spline stage. I'm going to grab all of the controls other than the feet, and I'm going to set them to spline, right? And then I'm going to do the same. Oh, actually I have to grab the controls here, 1 second. My graph editor is off screen. All I'm doing is selecting all of my values here. And then I'm going to select my spline button. And then I'm going to grab the feet controls, and I'm going to set those ones to auto tangents, right? Just like that. You can see that my tangents are not exactly smooth yet, which, if you recall, is going to be our next step. It's going to be to go through the graph editor and just smooth out all of these lines, right? You can see that it looks a little bit glitched. What's going on? Is it? I think this foot's still in blocking, right? Let me see here. Okay. Obviously, just hitting the spline button is not going to put us where we want to be. So we can see here that we have some of our general movement here, but I'm going to need to go into my graph editor and I'm going to need to see what is going on with like the foot here and the rest of the body, see if I can smooth it all out, right? That is the goal. So I'm going to break it down and prioritize one thing at a time. I'm going to start with the back foot because that one looks like it's giving me the most issues right now. And I'm just going to go into my graph editor just like before, and I'm going to see if I can smooth out these curves. Maybe just something like this. Get a nice rounded top, and then I can figure out by looking at it if this is something that I actually want to keep or not, right? That looks fine. Maybe I want to do this, maybe I don't, right? I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to see what it looks like. And if I don't hate it, then I'm just going to keep it for now, and then I can always change it again later, right? Okay, let's check out the other foot. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. All right. Just give this a more appealing shape. And right now is not really a time where I'm trying to create the perfect curves here. I'm just trying to create improved curves. And then when I'm done improving the curves by making them smoother, I can go back, watch my animation and see exactly what needs to be switched. And then I can prioritize which curves I'm going to readjust from that point on. But I'm just trying to break this down into sections, right? Right now I'm just trying to smooth the existing curves out. And then after I watch the animation back a few times, maybe I'll change the overall shape. Who knows? We have to get there before we do it. For something like this is our translate Z, right? That's our movement forward. I'm just going to see if I can just delete all of that and give him a consistent speed walking forward, right? Which is what that is right there, that line. The feet might be need to be adjusted also to go at the same speed. You can see that it's already starting to get to a better point here. It looks much smoother. It looks like our character is propelling himself forward. If I'm going to make a judgment call here, I'm going to say that his balance is a little bit off, right? I can see that his center of balance is right here above his heel, but all of his weight is being put on the toe here, right? Which means that his body should be moved forward a little bit so that is over the center of balance is over his actual foot, putting pressure on the ground. But I'm going to wait on that, and I'm just going to continue to clean up my curves here on my graph editor before I move on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back after I'm done doing that. I wanted to mention one of the steps that I take here with the feet specifically. Our up and down motion, right, when the foot comes up and then lands on the ground, is going to be very similar to that of a ball bounce. If you recall the shapes that we make on a ball bounce, you'll recall that we don't actually have an ease at the bottom of that bounce, right? So it's going to be the same principle here. I'm going to break my tangent so that only one is affected, and I can create this kind of slope downward, which should have the foot gain speed and then look like it's slapping onto the ground, right? And I'm going to do the same with the first portion here, right? As it lifts off the ground. Just like that. And I'm going to do that with the other foot as well. Just like this. And now that's going to be timing for my walk cycle. That's going to be a little bit more appealing. So at this point I have cleaned up my curves a little bit, and I think I've tried to get a little bit more refinement in the feet. I'm happier now with where it's at, And I think that at this point what I can do is start moving on to a bit more of a polish stage and see if I can look out for any other small mistakes, such as knee pops, which I mentioned earlier. I already know that there are a few knee pops. You can see one right here in the front leg. These are going to be important to keep your eye open for. What a knee pop essentially is a very extreme shape change from a bent position to a straight position, or the opposite, from a straight position to a bent position, right? So you can see here that we have a very large bend here, almost a 90-degree angle, and then all of a sudden the leg goes into a straight position. That would be considered a knee pop. And so that is too extreme of a change happening, and I need to make sure that when I'm creating this walk cycle, it has gradual changes in the shapes instead of extreme ones like this, right? So one thing that I might do is I just try to get rid of that straight shape and give it more of a curve, just like this. I can see that it still goes into a curve, or sorry, straight there, so I'll rotate it a little bit more, give it more of a curve, and now we can see that the leg does still have one knee pop right there. So I can try and alleviate that by making this part a little bit straighter and trying to blend those two shapes into each other, right? So as long as the shapes are blending into each other, then the knee pops are not going to be as noticeable, right? And now we can see that the shapes gradually move into each other, and so those knee pops are no longer there, right? Great. And so that's something that I want to make sure that I'm doing with both my legs. I don't think that the other one is suffering from as many knee pops, which is great. Which means less for me to need to worry about. And at this point, what I might do is also make sure that my rotations are good. I don't want it to be too extreme. I'm not looking for it to be overly exaggerated. I just want to make sure that the rotations are going in the directions that they should be going into, right? The screen right leg is up, so the screen right left body is rotated up in this direction, right? And then the same thing on the opposite. Screen left leg is up, so the screen left part of the body is rotated in that direction. So this is already looking pretty close to being where I want it to be. I think that maybe what I might do, just to add a little bit of polish, is have this nice little squash and stretch added to it, right? So at this bottom point, for example, I can just squash it just a little bit, right? Keep it squashed, and then as we're going down, we can give it a little bit of a stretch, right? And I'm just going to see how that looks. It's not supposed to add a lot, right? Squash and stretch is just meant to be adding a little bit of appeal to it, right? It's not meant to be super distracting. I don't need to create a crazy amount of squash and stretch to the point where that is what I'm noticing. You can see here when I play it slowly, that's where my squash and stretch is appearing, right? The last thing that I want to show with this exercise here is how we can put our cycle into an infinity motion, which means that our cycle will go on forever, right? Which is exactly what I've been planning for this whole time, which is why, again, we have our last pose and our first pose identical. What we want to be able to do is have this cycle go on for as long as we need it to go on, because oftentimes when we're trying to animate these walk cycles, we're not going to animate all 10 steps of the character's walking. We're just going to animate it so that we can replicate it, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up into my graph editor. First, I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to make sure that my infinity is checked on so I can see what it'll look like. I'm going to grab all of my keyframes here. I'll go to Curves, Post Infinity, and we're going to try Cycle with Offset. And now we're going to raise our timeline here. And we're going to see what this looks like. And there we have it. A walk cycle that will go on for as long as we need it to go on for. The whole point of this exercise is to figure out how to make the mechanics work with the entire body. Obviously, things are going to be different when we have a torso and a head and a neck, shoulders, all that stuff included, right? Which is why it's great to prioritize doing this, using this kind of rig, because using this kind of rig, we can see that it's much simpler to gauge the movements of the hips when we're not distracted by other appendages like arms. Even in these drawings, you can see here he didn't draw the arms, right? Because that's not the point right now when we're trying to learn mechanics. The point is just trying to break it down to as simple as possible and see if we can understand how mechanics work with each individual action. There's one more thing that I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention earlier, which is going to be the rate of speed that our character is moving forward. There are three controls that are propelling our character forward. The body control, right? And each one of these feet controls are individually propelling this character forward as opposed to just one solid control moving him. What that means is that we need to make sure that all three of these controls are moving forward at the exact same rate so that when we are going into our infinity cycle, the character doesn't stray off into one direction, or maybe one foot is going faster than the other or something like that. So what I'm going to do is some basic math just to figure out what that rate of speed is. If I select the body control here, I can see that my translate Z is set to -0.4, right? And then if I look at frame 25, I can see that the translate Z is -6.8. I can take a calculator and I can subtract 6.8 from 0.4. So that means that the rate of speed that this body is moving forward is at a rate of 6.4, right? This line is telling me that -0.4 to -6.8, it is moving at a rate of 6.4. That means that I need to move my feet at that exact same rate. And so you can see here that translate Z is 2 on my front foot right here on frame 1. On frame 25, that is going to be 8.4, which is an exact difference of 6.4. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with my back foot, right? I can see that translate Z starts at -1.2. And then on frame 25, it's set to 5.2, which is an exact difference of 6.4. So all three of my controls that are propelling my character forward have a difference of 6.4, meaning that they're always going to be moving at the exact same speed no matter how far forward this character walks.